What's up, beautiful people? Welcome to Jocz Productions. Today we're taking a look at the Articles of Confederation. One of the most significant developments of the Revolutionary period was the formation of a new government based upon the principles fought for during the American Revolution. You might recall, in order to limit the power of the government, many new state constitutions placed power into the hands of the legislative branch. Remember, the colonists had just got out of what was in their mind an abusive, tyrannical relationship. So when they go creating new state governments, they deliberately drafted state constitutions with very limited power. Many of the new state governments included State Bill of Rights, 7 of the 13 did. Most state governments minimized or eliminated the role of the executive branch, not a lot of power delegated to the governors of states, and most political power will be held in the legislative branch of the states. The legislative branch was often viewed as the most important branch of government. This is where laws would be made, and the idea behind this was the legislative branch was filled with representatives of the people of that state. Power held in the legislative branch would mean the government would be held accountable by the people, or at least the white male property owners that could vote in each state. The Articles of Confederation is the first attempt at a national government, and it is under the Articles that members of the Second Continental Congress sought to unify the newly independent states. The former colonists created a central government with limited power. Some examples of limits to government power under the Articles include: the Articles created a one-branch government. There was not an executive branch under the Articles. Just in case you are wondering, today we have 3 branches of government. The Articles had 1. There was not an executive branch under the Articles. They were very worried about creating a position that would exercise power like a king would. Also, there was no national court system. Each state had 1 vote in the unicameral or one-house legislative branch, and changes or amendments to the Articles required unanimous consent of all 13 states. That's going to be super hard to get, and to pass a law, it required 9 out of 13 states to agree. That is what is called a supermajority, and guess what? That is also super hard to achieve. Under the Articles, individual states were sovereign, so each state retained its sovereignty, freedom, and independence. Problems begin to emerge when, following the American Revolution, difficulties over international trade, finances, interstate commerce, foreign relations, and internal unrest led to calls for a stronger central government.
Do we have a problem?
That's a lot of problems. In the 1780s, the economy of the US was a hot mess. The new country was in debt with no real way to raise revenue. You might be wondering, what if we taxed? Well, under the Articles, the national government had zero authority to tax directly. States had the ability to tax, but not the federal government. In addition, Congress could not regulate interstate trade or commerce. Individual states could impose tariffs on other states, and states printed their own money. Many states were printing money after the American Revolution in an attempt to pay down their post-revolutionary debt, which basically led to a whole bunch of inflation. The new nation faced many threats from foreign countries as well. Britain still occupied forts in the Northwest Territory and traded weapons with Native Americans that were then used against Americans in the frontier. And since the Articles of Confederation can't raise money to deal with this violation of the Treaty of Paris, there was no national army to really deal with this issue. Spain stopped allowing the U.S. to use the port of New Orleans and closed the Mississippi River to U.S. trade in 1784. And people in the frontier, like in places like Tennessee and Kentucky, really relied on access to the Mississippi, and it was shut down. Now, we can't leave this video being a Debbie Downer about the Articles of Confederation. Don't tell my wife or any Debbies you know that I'm using the name Debbie in this way, but there were some positive things under the Articles of Confederation. The Articles did get the colonists through the American Revolution. That transition from colonists to citizens of the United States occurred under the Articles of Confederation. Now that England was no longer in charge, the Proclamation of 1763 was no longer keeping settlers from moving westward during the 1780s. As individuals headed west, Congress under the Articles of Confederation had to figure out how they were going to govern this new territory and how new territory may enter the Union as a new state. The Northwest Ordinance was passed by Congress under the Articles of Confederation to deal with these exact issues. And basically it provided for the organized settlement of territory in the West and outlined the process for statehood. When I talk about the Northwest Ordinances, please note there are a bunch of different laws passed, but the importance of it can be summed up as follows. One thing done under the Northwest Ordinances was the admission process for new states was established. Once a territory reached a certain number of settlers, the area would be eligible for statehood. The state would enter the Union as an equal state to the original 13. The Northwest Ordinance not only promoted public education and protected private property, but also banned slavery in the Northwest Territory. These states would eventually be the free states you see on the map. But while this is happening, new slave states would enter the Union in the South. This admission of free and slave states would eventually increase tensions between the North and South, but we'll save that for another time. Foreshadowing. And often overlooked when looking at the Northwest Ordinance is the fact, though, American settlement in this region increased tensions with Native American tribes. Finally, we need to take another turn to Negative Town, Shays' Rebellion. Some background. Many farmers were in debt in the 1780s. Many of these farmers had fought in the American Revolution, and it was very difficult to pay back the debt after the Revolution, and many of those in debt ended up in prison. Although the federal government could not tax, states passed their own taxes, and with all this money being printed, inflation became a big problem. Daniel Shays, a veteran of the American Revolution and fellow farmer in debt, began a movement to attempt to stop the foreclosure of farms, to lighten the taxes, and to provide relief to the farmers of Western Massachusetts. Unfortunately for Daniel and the farmers, their demands and petitions were ignored by the state legislature in Boston, so a group of angry farmers organized a march to the armory to get some guns to try to get the government of Massachusetts to listen to their demands. These demands were ignored, and as a result, Shays' Rebellion was a revolt by backcountry farmers, around 4,000 of them, against taxes imposed by a distant government in Boston. This situation scared the elite. You got angry American Revolution veterans, farmers making demands with guns. For some, this seemed like mob rule or something like Stamp Act 2.0, but this time the bad guys are the Americans. Or to sum up, so why is this important? As mentioned, Shays' Rebellion created a fear amongst the propertied classes. There was no way the Articles could respond. They can't fund a military, and Shays' Rebellion was actually put down by a state and privately funded militia. Shays' Rebellion led to increased calls for a stronger federal government, and for many, the rebellion demonstrated the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. It seemed like the Articles were not capable of governing, and some began to ask, maybe we need a new government. The Articles of Confederation, the first national government of the U.S., will eventually be replaced by the Constitution. And that's what we're going to cover in our next video, the Constitutional Convention. Until next time, thank you so much for watching this Jocz Productions video. Have a beautiful day. Peace.